everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Build Better Stuff podcast. Today I am joined by Lior Steinberg from Humankind. Hi, Lior.
Hey, hello.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Lior is going to be talking about strong communities and building better cities. So without further ado, Lior, could I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Lior Steinberg. I originally from Israel, from Tel Aviv, and I've been living in the Netherlands now for 6 years almost. And I'm an urban planner, so I'm running with my business partner. We are running an office for urban change called Humankind with cities to create better.
Oh, it just dropped out there. Are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I
Sorry,
am.
it just cut out the end of what you were saying there. You just stopped mid-sentence. Sorry, you were saying that you are involved in urban planning and urban change.
Okay, so should I start from the start? Or?
Yeah, if you and a little bit about. So yes, you were saying that you run with your business partner and you're doing urban change, and maybe a little bit about how you came to do that, what you like doing at school, and how
Okay,
you the business, that kind of thing. Okay,
Uh,
over to you.
so my name is Lior Steinberg. I'm originally from Tel Aviv, Israel, and for the past 6 years I've been living in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, and that's where I work as an urban planner, running my office called Humankind, which we call Agency for Change. Basically, what we do is that we work with our clients, which are normally cities or neighborhoods associations, and we're working with them together to create better public spaces, invest in the community cohesion, get residents together to work toward better public spaces, and we're working all around the world basically, so in different countries, different cities, seeing different types of cities that are in different places in terms of development, and yeah.
How exciting! How did you come to do this? Is this something that you'd always been interested in when you were at school?
uh, well, so I actually never thought I would do it. I always thought that architects are ones who shape our cities, and after school I programmer. I never thought I will ever do anything to do with cities, but during my time as a computer programmer in Israel, I started to just look around and seeing that cities are really complicated things, and there is no chance that nobody is actually responsible to shape them. And that's when I realized that there is a profession called urban planning that deals with all those issues. It made kind of a professional switch from computers to the planning world. Uh, did my master's in Stockholm University in urban and regional planning, and just started to work as an urban planner.
Fantastic. And obviously, with the name Humankind, you've obviously got a real interest and a focus on the people that make up cities, not just the buildings.
Yeah. So what we see in the way cities are now built, it's a sort of a process that is just ongoing in municipalities. It is just the way things are is to try to build efficient places with efficient mobility, where everything goes very smoothly with no problems. We see traffic jams and we just try to make them better, building more roads. We see housing problems. We just try to build big buildings to house all those people, but we never really think about the human experience in urban planning. I mean, of course, many people do think, but if you look at the cities being built, the neighborhoods being built, most of them are not very human scaled. So you look at them and you ask yourself, yeah, would a person that built it would really want to live here? And that's what we really work with cities, create places where actually people can be living in, smiling, be nice to each other. That's basically what we try to achieve.
That sounds like a massive challenge. You mentioned before that you work in lots of different cities and countries all around the world. Are there common themes, problems that cities have, or do they tend to be unique to each country?
So, give an example, because there are different themes when it comes to urbanism and urban planning, and one major theme that I would say decides everything, or is very dominant dominant in urban planning, is mobility. And basically, everyone can look out of the window and basically would see a road, and that's most of our public space. Most of the space that belongs to all of us is dedicated to roads and to car traffic. And I would say that cities all around the world have this issue of giving way too much space for traffic, for cars, for moving people from one place to another, while in by doing so also kind of making the public space less livable, because there are so many
Mm.
cars moving. And what I would say is that there are different countries, different cities, all of them have this issue of having all this car infrastructure in the city, and it's very difficult for them to imagine how a future would be without it. But what I can say is that some countries are ahead in that sense. So in the Netherlands, where we are based and work, it's more normal to see people cycling and walking, and much less space is dedicated to car traffic. While in other cities that we've been in or work in, you can see that it's very difficult to convince the mayor or the stakeholders to give more space for people and less for car traffic.
Mm. Absolutely. That's such a problem. At the time that we are recording this podcast, lots of the world finds itself in the grip of the coronavirus pandemic, which has caused lots and lots of countries to change the way that people commute, because people are being required to keep more of a distance from each other. And certainly for some cities I've been reading, they have suddenly had a resurgence in the number of people using bikes and cycling, because they don't want to be necessarily packed into public transport. Is that something that you see yourself? Is that something that you think might hopefully start a trend?
Well, now we are really inside the entire corona outbreak, so it's very difficult to think what would be in the future, and I hope it will be a positive one. With, of course, we will learn our lessons in terms of mobility, and we'll think, yeah, it's better to have active mobility, but it's very difficult to predict. But what I certainly see, if I compare uh, where I live in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, and no need to use public transportation. So also throughout the year, even before the outbreak of the coronavirus, uh, I use public transportation. Sometimes I use the car, but I don't really need to do it. I do it only if it's really convenient. I can reach everywhere by walking or cycling. And I would say that now I feel much safer that I still can do it. I can still cycle wherever I want, not being next to too many people around me. And I just saw today a picture from London, from the tube. Still, people are crowds of people together, because people have to go to work. They have to do it, and they don't have any other option. I mean, I know that cycling is getting better and better in London, but still, many people don't know how to cycle or don't have a safe way to do it. And just by the fact that in Dutch cities you have this possibility to to do it by yourself, not using public transportation, is already a great can show that there are much more advantages that we've never thought about when it comes to active mobility planning.
Absolutely. What do you see as the main problems involved in cities that have this reliance on cars and things? Obviously, the current situation with pandemics and things is hopefully a very unusual one and not something
Yeah.
that's going to happen too often. But generally speaking, what do you see as being the problem when cities are too reliant on cars?
So I would say you have two main issues in my opinion. I mean, in my opinion, there are plenty of issues, but let's say that there are two main issues. One is the land use problem. So it's the way we need to the way we shape our cities, where we give some space for buildings and some space for public spaces like squares and parks, and some space for roads. And since everybody needs to use the car, we need to give so much space for roads. So we end up with neighborhoods and cities that look like highways. Those are unsafe places for children to play outside. It's not nice to walk. Everything is far away from each other, because between every building or between every neighborhood you have huge roads. It's impossible to walk from home to school in many cases. And the problem with it is that everybody gets kind of addicted to cars. So the only way you can get around is to own a car, and by doing so you make need for more roads to be built, which kind of sustain this problem of building more roads, which means that more people would need car, and it's never ending. So that's the first problem, is the land use problem, and the other problem is the fact that it just creates unsafety. People are not only in those countries or cities that are um, that the majority of trips are being done by car. They have more accidents, of course, but they also have much less active citizens. People who actually do their 30 minutes a day moderate physical activity, because most people just finish breakfast, enter the car, go to work or to school, and go back with a car. We don't have a active population that actually moves around.
Absolutely, very true. And I think those things start to impact then on healthcare provision and that kind of thing. So actually, we all end up paying the price for that. That people are.
Absolutely, and also we are missing. I mean, there are so many things that change when you start seeing more people on the streets. I mean, just you mentioned physical, but what about mental health? The possibility to see more people when you go to school by foot or cycling. You make eye contact with more people. You get to speak maybe with a neighbor that you see in the corner. All those things are impossible when you enter what I describe as just a metal box that take you from A to B. The journey is not important anymore. It's just about getting as fast as possible to other places.
When you started on your new career in urban planning, when you moved across from IT and computers, is this the sort of problem that you thought you'd be solving? Is this something you'd recognized yourself in your own life?
Yeah. So I was in IT, but I also lived in a very car-oriented country in Israel, and I got to read Jane Jacobs' legendary book from the 60s, Death and Life of Great American Cities. And it's a book written yeah, by a non-urbanist, or let's say not a professional urban planner. And Jane Jacobs just observed New York and other American cities and seeing what's working and what's not. And she, back then in the 60s, she described cities that are building more and more roads, ruining the great, nice urban fabric of old American neighborhoods. And I looked around me in Israel and I saw that it's happening also there 50 years later. And I thought, yeah, this is really an issue that needs to be solved, because someone has already talked about it 50 years ago. I see online a lot of people agreeing with that, but it's not really changing. So this is really was my goal to try to work on that.
I get the sense that some of these problems obviously came about because of the invention of the motor car, or the popularity of the motor car. And as you say, for Jane Jacobs, when she was writing her book, that sort of 1960s, 1970s boom of car ownership must have had a huge visual effect on changing of cities and neighborhoods. Do you have any thoughts on what some of the other origins of this problem might be? Is it simply because we live a more demanding lifestyle now? Is it just laziness,
Yeah, I
convenience?
think I don't think that laziness plays so much role in that. We just the car is, or the roads and And cars are the cause or main cause of the problem, but they're also the symptom of our, uh, in my opinion, the way we kind of forgot what is really important in cities. So, uh, for instance, I think that what is important are great neighborhoods with small shops, with local entrepreneurs, with uh, the corner cafe where you can meet your neighbor, and that other neighbor that you know that makes sure that when you're not home, everything is fine. I think that's what makes really great cities, and more because the way we change our lifestyle, uh, efficiency takes more and more space. And the car is one symptom for that. Yeah, we just try to get fast from one place to another. But another symptom for that is the way we build now buildings. I mean, if you look at London, the old parts of London or any other European cities, you see those very beautiful, detailed houses that were not only houses for rich people. I mean, nowadays only rich people can afford living in those beautiful streets. But back then, that was just the norm. We built slowly houses that really fit the families that lived there, and each one looks a little bit different, but together they look very beautiful together. It just works well. But now, if you look at new developments, it's just copy paste. They all look the same. It's very efficient. You produce uh, boxes, put each other, stack them off each other, and you get huge high rises where all look the same. Anonymity is a very big thing in those skyscrapers, residential skyscrapers, and it feels like, yeah, we are achieving to building much more, but the quality of what we're doing is very bad because we put much more stress on efficiency and not on quality of life, and yeah, on getting together, living in a cohesion way.
All of the things that make us human and make us that sort of tribal animal that we are, that we need to be around a pack of people. Um, do you think that that's perhaps caused by fear, lack of imagination by some of the people who put forward these projects? Do you think it's that sort of they're comfortable with the old way of thinking and they just keep on doing it rather than thinking what would work better?
Yeah, in general, all of us, we are afraid of change. So we see the world as it is now, and we just try to keep the status quo. And if we look at our own mobility systems or the way we build neighborhoods, I mean, on the back of those things, there are just huge processes by tons of people that just everybody is doing their own job, not looking at the big picture. There is someone who is approving the intersection, and someone who is planning how wide the road should be, and then someone that tries to fill up the empty space with schools and houses, and everybody has tons of work to do, just needs to approve things and plan their own little box of work. And making a change requires either a huge crisis or a huge change change in the world order or in the city order, and probably also a leader that sees that it doesn't the way things go now cannot continue. And it seems like I'm very pessimistic, but those changes are happening all around the world. So we see a lot of mayors and leaders that try to start to change things. They see that things are not working, uh, and they're not sustainable. They cannot keep going, and they make big changes. I mean, we see a lot of cities that are making those changes already.
How exciting. I know that you probably can't go into too much detail about the cities specifically, but are there any that really encapsulate the ethos of humankind, the things that you really want places to be aspiring to?
Um, with every city I go to, I can always find a lot of terrible things, but also beautiful places and a lot of great people working to make a change. But for instance, Amsterdam, that until the 70s looked like a big highway made those changes. In the 70s, basically starting to close streets for cars and just opening them for pedestrians and cyclists. You can see a lot of parts of London being transformed now from just roads. I know that London builds some super highways for bicycles. I see their programs where they have school streets where they close the streets outside schools to have everybody being able to come safely by walking or by cycling. Oslo, in Norway, that has closed basically the entire city center for car traffic, welcoming everybody with great public transportation or cycling or walking. Um, Madrid in Spain, that has been basically applying a 30 km per hour limit on all the roads, making all the roads very slow and safe for even children to just walk there safely and cross the road safely. So those changes, you see them all around, and this is only Europe. I mean, you see in South America a lot of projects, the US, and Asia, of course. China, bicycle usage is booming. They're building a lot of bicycle lanes, so you do see those changes all around, and I think the coming few decades will be very interesting in that sense.
It sounds like you obviously work with people who understand that things could be better, that things should be better, and you help them to do that. What would you say to people who are still a bit skeptical or a bit reluctant? What would you say are the main benefits for cities?
So my close colleagues, they definitely understand that, and also many of our clients or cities we work with. But the majority of our work is just convincing. So most of our days is not working with people who understand it, actually convincing people who don't understand it. So you might even work in a city that would request you to redesign a square and maybe remove in the square the parking spaces in order to create more space for people to sit and play. But then you would have a politician that really is supported by many shop and car owners that would really want the space to stay, and then the parking spaces to stay, and then the job is to really start thinking about how can you convince them that actually by removing parking spaces you will create not only a nicer square, you will also create more business for shop owners that are now afraid of the change, and you might also find enough transportation for the residents who live around and own a car and rely on those free parking spaces on the square, etc., etc. So actually, you really need to convince people, and the way we do it is either by showing examples from other places in the city or other countries with a similar situation, or sometimes even offering them to make an experiment, just try it out. It's it's a bit more difficult than it sounds, but basically it means that we can just try to close off a street uh, or remove parking spaces only for a few weeks or a few months and see if it works or not. And more often than not, or actually I would say almost always, it works amazingly. So people are very afraid of change. They're very afraid of the consequences of removing infrastructure for cars, replace it with other things. But when you make the change and you promise them that it's only for a temporary amount of time, a limited amount of time, they see that it's actually a very great, it's a great change in their street, and they more often than not they want to keep it in the new way.
That's a great way to take people very gently towards what you're helping them to achieve without them having to make big decisions right there and then. You mentioned just then about how some of the business owners might generate more trade by not having cars there. How have you seen that work? Where does that extra trade and business come from?
So I think all our listeners can just close their eyes and imagine, uh, unless they're cycling. Uh,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Students and teachers do this while you're sitting still.
well, basically imagine the places you like the most, the place the best places the best streets in your city or places you visited, and it's always some sort of either a pedestrianized street or a great plaza or a park that anyway doesn't have access to cars. And what we try to explain to shop owners that think that most of their clients are arriving with cars is that it's untrue. So they they of course remember those clients who come with cars because they normally have very big uh, shopping bags and they load their cars with all the shopping. But the majority of clients are arriving by foot in most city centers. They're arriving by foot or with a bicycle. Uh, these small things. Um, and of course, per person, it sounds like you'd prefer a customer with a car, but actually they're coming in bigger numbers and they're also coming more often. So someone with a car, a client with a car would come maybe once a week or twice a month, while a person that cycles along a street every day would stop almost every day, buy something small. So you get a much larger flow of customers. Also, when it comes to cafes and restaurants or pubs, the owners might think, yeah, I need my clients to arrive here and be able to park, so I can serve them. But it doesn't really remember all those clients that arrived with a car, look for a parking space for half an hour, and this happens in city centers more often than not. So. Um, when you're making your street more accessible and more quiet and safe for people from all ages to arrive with great public transportation, great bicycle infrastructure, and of course, amazing wide and safe sidewalks, you are able to move much more people in the street and welcome many more customers.
Very interesting, and I think a really good exercise, perhaps for some of the students listening to this, to indeed think about the places that you go past every day, perhaps places that you go past in the car. You know, if you drive or if your parents are driving you, um, some of the places that you think look interesting, but you never get a chance to go into because perhaps you just have to go sailing past and there's never anywhere to park. Maybe places that you, if you were walking, you would get a chance to see and know more about. It sounds like humankind have got a huge challenge to make cities better around the world. And I know that there are, as you've said, other people who share your ethos or are starting to think about ways to make their city better. Do you work with other organizations in the Netherlands or elsewhere in the world to come together and do more of this?
Yeah, so we are, uh, first of all, we work with great collaborators locally, a lot of people, planners, architects, artists, psychologists, sociologists, everybody. I mean, it's not only a technical job. I mean, my business partner, Joran Vemenove, is not an urban planner, but he's an urbanist because he works on cities. So we do work on different collaborators. And then when it comes to organizations, we are, for instance, we are members of the Dutch Cycling Embassy, which is it's a sort of cooperation between many companies from the Netherlands that work on bicycle infrastructure. We have there from engineering companies to construction companies to bicycle manufacturers and planners and urbanists, all working together to create more bicycle infrastructure. And what we do is that we go together to different cities in different countries, and we offer them this entire Dutch experience developing bicycle infrastructure. So this is one thing we do, and of course we're just very active online. Twitter and LinkedIn are the places where most urban like professional urbanists are exchanging ideas, and that's where we really share. I mean, it's a very positive environment in comparison to many other Twitter worlds or feeds. I mean, over there it's very sharing experiences, best practices, and teaching each other what works and what doesn't, and just asking help. It's very nice.
Fantastic. And that might be something for students or for teachers to take a look at, to come and perhaps join some of your, to follow you on social media, but also to follow some of the conversations that you're having and to see some of this collaboration, because I think that will give students again a sense of how they can start to become involved in this.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're more than open. I mean, they shoot us an email, we can share with them more people they can follow on. But we're also very open for people that would like to share their experience in their cities, how they see, and especially youngsters and students that many times don't have a say in city hall. I mean, they're not politicians, or many of them are not even active voters yet. But they still need to have a say in city planning, and in many ways they are using public spaces much more than any other residents. They're many times out there in parks, in squares, in streets, and we always happy to hear their experiences and ideas of how their city can be better, and what can be improved.
Fantastic. I think at the end of this podcast, I'll put up maybe some of these links so that people can connect with you, because I think that's a really great practical way for students who have some ideas for how their own town, their own city, their own neighborhood could be better, and perhaps even ways to look at occasionally temporarily closing the street outside their school, or closing the street where they live, so that children can play safely, and pedestrians and commuters can arrive by foot or by bicycle, and actually start to experience those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there are many active people in the UK doing doing those things out of organizations, and many times it really starts with a small thing. You just see a square that could look a little better, and even if you are not a planner or a politician, you can always organize an event, make a football game there, uh, take out some chairs and sit together, greet neighbors. There are plenty of ways you can make a public space better without being an engineer or an architect.
How exciting. Thank you. You mentioned that obviously you share a lot of information online as well. Are there other ways that people can learn about what you're doing, some of the events that you hold? Do you have webinars or activities like that that people can get involved with?
Well, so yeah, so we are sharing most of our projects and our thoughts on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and of course on our website we have a blog where we also have guest writers who share their urban thoughts about making cities more human and kind. We are now trying to build up a webinar platform, especially now that again the coronavirus is really changing the way people are consuming professional information. It used to be much more about going to conferences. Maybe it will change a little bit now, where people see that actually those things are possible online. Maybe it's also will reduce the amount of time people are the amount of flights people are taking throughout the year. So I mean, stay tuned. I will definitely update on our social media, and of course we have a weekly newsletter which we are sharing interesting links from around the world. So not our work, but other great urbanists and thinkers and people who just make a change in cities. We share those projects just to empower each other. Basically, that's our goal there. Yeah, those are the ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything that you wish that I'd asked you that I haven't, that you want to talk about?
Well, you asked, you asked me, yeah, all the right questions. I'm just the last thing I maybe would like to say is that many of the things I said I sound certain about. So we need to plan a city like this and not like that. And I also think that this way of being so certain about how our cities should look like have led us to this situation. So it was a very engineering dominated world. Um, we all thought that there is this one solution, and we followed it, and now we have cities that we need to fix. And of course, the solution is people think differently, and I might not have all the answers. I definitely don't have all the answers, and that's why I think that my main goal, basically, in talking in this podcast and just sharing all this information in plain English online, is to empower just residents, teenagers, elderly, everybody who lives in the city to share their opinion. And what I would like to say is that it's really important not to be afraid to talk about cities. I mean, we are all specialists when it comes to cities because we are all living in villages, towns, and cities. We are all urbanists in a way. So the opinion of everyone is equal as the opinion of professional planners. I mean, that's I think that's very important to remember.
Fantastic, and so very true. Absolutely. Whatever your lived experience is of wherever you live is relevant, is absolutely valid, and you know, if you can identify problems where you are, those are problems that need solving. They don't just they're not simply problems if someone who's a professional identifies them as a problem. And,
Exactly.
and lots of ways for young people to get involved. I know that you've obviously had a change in career path yourself, and it sounds like new ideas and things are something that is really important to this line of work. Do you have an idea of what kind of things students might need to be good at to come into this space, to come into urban planning?
Yeah, so the first one is the ability to observe, sit on a bench, look around, and being able to just see how the city works. Definitely read the book I mentioned. I will also share the link by Jane Jacobs, which is really written in plain, witty English and is great to read. It's not a professional book.
It's
And
very
then
timeless, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And then I would say that for me, I was never a good. I could never make good sketches or anything, but with computer programs like Photoshop and SketchUp, many of them are free online, especially for students and yeah, school students. You can just try to learn those programs. They're all for free on YouTube. There are a lot of free courses, and I think that once you read um, a little bit of blogs and few books, you already know much more than most people when it comes to urban planning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lior, for joining us today. And hopefully for students and teachers, that's given you a little bit of a taster of what's involved in urban planning, but also a sense of some of the problems that need solving and some of the temporary and immediate ways that you can come up with ideas for ways to solve those problems. Thank you, Lior Steinberg, for joining us today from Humankind. Next time on Build Better Stuff, we'll be talking about another aspect of the built environment and how it can be better for you. So join us again then. Thanks very much.